I looked my 35-year-old son, Julian, straight in the eye. My hands trembled as I uttered the heaviest words a father could ever say. I told him my offshore investments had completely collapsed. I said the market had wiped me out, that my $45 million fortune was gone, and that we had to sell our ancestral mountain estate just so I could survive. I bowed my head, waiting for him to reach across the table, to hold my hand and tell me we'd get through it together as a family. Instead, the corners of his mouth curled into a slow, calculating smile. His eyes lit up with a dark excitement I had never seen before. He leaned back in his chair and muttered a single word. Finally! What my greedy, arrogant son didn't know was that I was not broke at all. My fortune was perfectly secure inside blind trusts he had zero access to. The entire bankruptcy story was a desperate test to see if the boy I raised would catch his father when he fell. And he had failed instantly. My name is Arthur Sterling. I am 70 years old, living in the crisp mountain air of Aspen, Colorado. I spent 40 years building an industrial logistics empire from nothing. When my wife Alina passed away 5 years ago, the silence in our 400-acre estate became deafening. Julian was our only child. Married to a woman named Victoria, they lived a life of flashy luxury on credit, constantly relying on me as their silent ATM. Lately, their requests for money had turned into aggressive demands, accompanied by subtle hints that I was too old and weak to manage my estate. So I devised the test, but I had no idea how dark things would get. That night, Julian didn't ask where I would live or how I'd afford food. He simply declared he would manage the sale of the estate. After they retired to the guest wing, I sat alone in the dark study, feeling my heartbreak morph into an icy fury. But the true nightmare began at sunrise. Standing hidden near the patio, I overheard Julian frantically whispering into his cell phone about selling my property to a corporate shadow buyer for $35 million and dumping me into a state-run asylum. And then came the twist that nearly stopped my heart. The secret buyer he was so desperately trying to sell my land to was a company I secretly owned. Hidden in the kitchen shadows, I listened to every word of Julian's phone conversation. He wasn't talking to a realtor. He was reporting to an illegal gambling syndicate. Over the past 5 years, my son had built up a $10 million debt to an underground cartel in Las Vegas. His master plan was to steal my estate, flip it to Apex Logistics Group for $35 million, pay off his cartel handlers, and keep the rest while locking me away in a bleak state facility where I'd be forgotten. The old man took the bait, Julian sneered into the receiver. Once he signs the transfer deed, I have a doctor lined up to declare him legally incompetent. He won't even remember his own name by Christmas. My stomach turned to ice. My own flesh and blood wanted to steal my freedom, my dignity, and my mind. But what Julian didn't realize was that Apex Logistics Group was a subsidiary of my master holding firm. He was trying to sell my own property back to me. Over the next 2 days, Julian and Victoria began executing their plan. Victoria suddenly began playing the overly devoted daughter-in-law, hovering around me to keep me isolated from financial advisors. Every evening at sunset, she brought me a tall, frosted glass of a pale green, herbal smoothie, claiming it was to calm my anxiety and help me sleep. The drink had a sharp, metallic aftertaste. I quickly realized they were trying to drug me. Instead of drinking it, I pretended to swallow while wiping my chin with a napkin, pouring the remaining liquid into a concealed stainless steel thermos beneath my bed. By the third morning, they grew bold. 3 black SUVs carrying muscular men in suits pulled up to my gate. They were cartel enforcers already surveying my land. When I pointed them out, Julian placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered with fake concern, "Dad, there's nobody there. You're hallucinating." They were using the poison in my system to manufacture artificial dementia in real time, setting the trap to declare me incompetent. I feigned total defeat, slumping into my chair and whispering, "You're right. I'm so confused." Julian smirked, believing he had completely broken me. But the moment he walked away, I locked my study door, retrieved the hidden thermos of poison, and prepared to initiate a secret counterstrike that would tear his entire world apart. Before dawn the next morning, while Julian and Victoria were fast asleep, I slipped out to the carriage house, started my vintage pickup truck, and drove down the mountain to Denver. I didn't go to a public hospital where records could be accessed. I went to an independent private toxicology lab, paying $3,000 in cash for an expedited analysis of the green smoothie. Next, I bought a prepaid burner phone and placed 2 critical calls. The first was to Jonathan Pierce, my ruthless corporate attorney of 30 years. I revealed the fake bankruptcy, the cartel plot, and the attempt to drug me. Jonathan's voice trembled with rage. "Tell me what you need, Arthur," he said. My second call was to Marcus Reed, a former federal investigator turned elite private detective. I instructed Marcus to pull every transaction, travel log, and debt ledger tied to Julian's name. I want to know every cent he owes and every criminal he owes it to, I demanded. Before heading back up the mountain, I stopped at a high-end surveillance store and purchased 3 military-grade voice-activated micro-recorders no larger than postage stamps. I returned to the estate before anyone woke up. Moving silently through the house, I planted the first bug directly under the wooden slats of Julian and Victoria's mattress. I planted the second bug inside the steering column of Julian's luxury vehicle, right next to his hands-free microphone. Every secret conversation they had would now transmit directly to my encrypted server. That afternoon, Julian walked into my study with a leather binder of preliminary transfer deeds. "Just sign here, Dad," he said smoothly. "My investor friend is coming Friday to finalize the sale and save you." I slouched in my chair, letting my hands shake violently against the desk, pretending to be a frail, brain-damaged old man. "I'm so tired, Julian," I rasped. "I'll do whatever you want." He smiled his cold, predatory smile, completely unaware that my mind was sharp as steel. That evening, the lab results hit my burner phone. The liquid was laced with heavy doses of haloperidol, a potent antipsychotic that mimics severe dementia and causes irreversible brain damage in large amounts. They weren't just trying to steal my estate. They were methodically destroying my brain. But my private investigator was about to deliver the final piece of evidence I needed to lock them up forever. My private investigator, Marcus, called back with a terrifying report. Julian had blown through every dime of his own fortune on underground sports gambling in Las Vegas. He owed $10 million to a vicious desert cartel who had threatened to murder Victoria if he didn't deliver the money by the end of the month. Julian's panic had driven him to sacrifice his own father, but he had fundamentally misunderstood who he was dealing with. The next morning, I met my attorney, Jonathan, in an empty warehouse in Denver. "He thinks he's selling the estate to Apex Logistics for $35 million, I told Jonathan. "He doesn't know I own Apex, but we aren't just going to block the sale. We're going to buy his life." Jonathan frowned. "What do you mean?" "I want you to set up an untraceable shell company by noon," I instructed. "Wire $15 million of my private cash. Contact the heads of that Las Vegas syndicate. Offer to buy out Julian's entire $10 million debt portfolio, plus a $3 million premium for their total cooperation and silence." Jonathan stared in shock. "You're becoming his sole creditor." "Exactly," I replied. "By Friday morning, when he thinks he's signing a deed to save himself, he will actually be signing his entire existence over to a holding company I control. The cartel will walk away, but his debt won't vanish. He will owe $10 million directly to me." For the next 2 days, I played the helpless victim to perfection. Victoria shoved the daily poisoned smoothies in my face, snapping, "Drink it, Harrison. I'm sick of looking at your blank face." I pretended to drink, spitting it out into a hidden towel every single time. Julian walked around the estate like a king, boasting on his phone about how he was dumping me in a state ward by Saturday morning. On Thursday night, I listened to the live audio feed from their bedroom. Victoria laughed about having decorators gut my study on Monday, while Julian bragged, "He won't even recognize us if we ever visit," which we won't. I took off the headphones. The grief in my heart had completely burned away, replaced by solid, impenetrable ice. Friday morning arrived under heavy gray mountain clouds. The notary, the cartel enforcer, and my son walked into my study, ready for the final kill. They had no idea that federal agents were already surrounding the house. At 9 o'clock on Friday morning, the study doors opened. Julian walked in wearing a tailored navy suit, radiating complete victory. Victoria followed, alongside a nervous notary and a broad-shouldered man in a dark suit, the cartel enforcer sent to ensure the property deed was secured. Julian spread the legal documents across my mahogany desk. He pressed a gold fountain pen into my hand. "Just sign here, Dad," he whispered softly. "I'm saving you." Victoria smirked. "We're going to take such good care of you, Harrison." I let the pen rattle against the desk, forcing my shoulders to shake violently. The cartel enforcer glared impatiently. For 10 seconds, the room was silent. Then I stopped shaking. I straightened my spine, sat up tall, and looked Julian dead in the eyes. I opened my hand and let the gold pen drop with a loud click. I turned my gaze to Victoria. "The haloperidol leaves a very bitter aftertaste, Victoria," I said, my voice deep and commanding. "You should have used more sugar in those smoothies." Victoria went dead pale, stepping back in horror. Julian froze, his face draining of color. What did you say?" he stammered. I pulled open my desk drawer and tossed a thick folder onto the papers. "I'm saying your attempt at a chemical lobotomy failed," I said. "This is a certified toxicology report from Denver, and underneath it are 70 pages of transcripts from micro-recorders under your mattress. I heard every word. The notary dropped his briefcase in terror, but the cartel enforcer stepped forward, reaching inside his jacket for a suppressed firearm. "I don't care about your family drama, old man," he growled. "Your son owes $12 million. You're signing this deed now, or I'll break your hands." "You're not breaking anything," I replied calmly. Before he could pull his gun, the heavy oak doors were violently kicked open. "FBI, nobody move!" Shouting federal agents and state police poured into the room with weapons raised. The enforcer was slammed onto the desk and handcuffed instantly. The notary collapsed to his knees, weeping. Julian fell to his knees, sobbing hysterically. "Dad, please tell them it's a mistake." I walked around the desk and looked down at him. "I called them, Julian. You thought you were selling the land to Apex Logistics, but I am the majority owner of Apex. And yesterday, I bought your $10 million debt from the cartel. You don't owe them anymore. You owe me." Julian stared in total despair as the steel cuffs clicked around his wrists. Victoria shrieked hysterically as federal officers snapped handcuffs on her wrists, screaming, "You can't do this to me. I'm family." I turned my cold gaze to her. "Family protects each other, Victoria. You fed me heavy antipsychotics and smiled. You're a parasite, and your ride is over." They were dragged out of the mountain estate into waiting police cruisers. As I watched the red and blue lights flash against the pine trees, my attorney, Jonathan, placed a hand on my shoulder. "You saved your own life today, Arthur," he said quietly. "I did," I replied, "but it's a tragic thing for a father to realize his worst enemy was the child he raised. The legal destruction was swift and absolute. The audio recordings and toxicology reports provided irrefutable evidence of wire fraud, criminal conspiracy, and attempted poisoning. Because my shell company owned Julian's $10 million debt, I placed immediate liens on his luxury home, vehicles, and accounts, leaving them completely penniless. They were forced to rely on public defenders. I refused to accept any plea deals. I attended every single court hearing sitting comfortably in the front row in a custom suit. Julian couldn't even meet my gaze. He sat at the defense table looking like the broken, helpless shell he had tried to turn me into. 6 months later, the judge delivered the final verdict. He condemned their actions as a masterclass in profound cruelty and unchecked greed. Julian was sentenced to 15 years in a maximum security federal prison without parole. Victoria was sentenced to 8 years for her active role in the poisoning. Today, I stand on the wraparound porch of my mountain estate, breathing in the fresh Colorado air. The silence of the 400 acres is no longer lonely. It is a hard-won peace. My hands are perfectly steady, my mind is razor-sharp, and at 70 years old, I have never felt more alive. I transferred $20 million into a legal foundation in my late wife Alina's name, dedicated to protecting vulnerable seniors from financial exploitation and familial abuse. The remaining $30 million stays safely in my blind trusts to fund my peaceful life. Blood does not guarantee loyalty, and unconditional love should never be a blindfold against the truth. I built a legacy to protect my son, but when he tried to destroy me, I didn't crumble, I purified it. My estate is mine, my future is mine, and my mind belongs completely to me for the rest of my days.